Hi, I'm Amy.
And I'm Maria.
And we're going to teach you about aggregate supply and demand.
Let's start off with aggregate demand. Here we have an aggregate demand curve. The aggregate demand curve shows the relationship between the price level and quantity of real output demanded by households, firms, and the government. This curve is downward sloping for three different reasons. One, the wealth effect, which is when a higher price level reduces the purchasing power of households' wealth and decreases consumer spending. Two, the interest rate effect, which says that as price level increases, interest rates also increase. And three, the net export effect. This says that when the domestic price level increases, imports increase and exports decrease, therefore reducing net exports. The aggregate demand curve consists of consumption, government spending, investments, and net exports. Aggregate demand shifts due to changes in expectations, changes in foreign variables, and government policy. Let's start with an example of expectations. If a household is optimistic about their future income, they are more likely to increase investments. This then shifts aggregate demand to the right. Next, we have an example of foreign sector. The U.S. doesn't have as good as rice as Japan. Therefore, they will purchase more of that foreign good. This will cause net exports to fall, and aggregate demand will then shift to the left. Lastly, we have government policy. For example, if the government increases the money supply, interest rates will fall. This causes a rightward shift in aggregate demand. Now remember, if there's a change in price level, it's only a movement along aggregate demand curve.
Next, we have the aggregate supply curve, which shows the relationship between the price level and the level of aggregate output supplied by firms. Here is a picture of short-run aggregate supply.
The short-run aggregate supply is upward sloping due to sticky wages and sticky prices. Since normal wages tend to be fixed or sticky by contracts, they're slow to adjust to price changes. Therefore, when prices rise but higher wages don't accompany them, profits rise and firms produce more. Sticky or fixed prices are found in some industries because prices are costly to change, so a decrease in price level would decrease sales and profits, and producers would produce less.
The 5 economic variable costs that can shift the short-run aggregate supply are input costs, expectations, productivity, supply shocks, and government actions. Here are some examples. Let's start with an example of a shift in supply due to input costs.
Here's Maria with some rice. The price of rice recently went down, allowing Maria to get more rice for the same price and make more sushi. This decrease in the cost of rice causes a rightward shift to Maria's sushi supply curve. Supply shocks due to natural disaster or terrorism shift the supply curve to the left. Let's say that a natural disaster destroys rice fields. The price of rice would increase due to the decrease in supply, and this would be shown on a graph as a leftward shift on the supply curve. When aggregate supply and demand are put together, this is the resulting graph.
Now that we've talked about aggregate supply and demand, we'll move on to long-run aggregate supply. This is a vertical line at the real GDP level. This is a graph of long-run aggregate supply at equilibrium.
In the long run, the economy will produce the potential GDP, which is GDP produced at full employment or at the natural rate of unemployment. Another thing to take note of is that all prices are fully flexible in the long run.
If the aggregate demand and supply curves intersect on the right side of the LRAS, there is an inflationary gap. When they intersect on the right side of the graph, the unemployment rate is less than the natural rate of unemployment. This is an inflationary gap. In the long run, the economy will eventually move back to full employment. This is because employers are forced to raise wages in order to attract workers because there is an outstanding number of job openings than seekers. As a result, price level raises, which lowers consumption.
If the aggregate supply and demand curves intersect on the left side of the LRAS, then this is a recessionary gap. When they intersect on the left side of the graph, the unemployment rate is higher than the natural rate of unemployment. The real GDP is less than the potential GDP due to the increase in unemployment.
This is a graph of the recessionary gap.
Since more job seekers are in the market during a recession, they tend to settle for lower wages. These lower wages decrease input costs, which increases the short-run aggregate supply. When the short-run aggregate supply increases, price levels decrease and in effect increases consumption. Until long-run equilibrium is reached, this process will continue.
Thanks for watching one of our videos.